After 7 years of living off the very house I bought my son and daughter-in-law, suddenly won $85 million. But instead of being grateful for the shelter I gave them by noon that very day, my daughter-in-law had cruelly thrown all my belongings out the window, china shattering across the street, while she screamed, "We don't need to do charity for you anymore. Go die old in a nursing home." I stood in the yard, clothes dusty and rumpled, my heartbeat steady, and quietly said, "Did you read the name on the back of the ticket?" Her victorious smile froze for a split second, and soon that single question would make her glittering world collapse for good. I'm Lorraine Whitmore, 63, a widow for nearly a decade. Since Arthur passed, the 2-story house in the suburbs of Savannah, Georgia became my only refuge, and then my son Mason's as well, along with his beautiful but overly sharp wife, Belle. 7 years ago, when Mason lost his job and Belle was pregnant, they knocked on my door in a fall storm, soaked and shivering. I opened the door, didn't ask much, and just said, "Come in. This house always has room for you." From then on, we lived together 3 generations, seemingly peaceful until that fateful morning. That morning, I got up early as usual to make coffee and pancakes for the little ones, Ava 8 and Micah 5. But instead of the small footsteps chattering down the stairs, I heard a scream rip through the house from downstairs. "Mason, get up! Get up now!" Belle's shrill voice rang out, bursting with excitement. I set the coffee pot down, heart pounding. I was used to my daughter-in-law's temper, but today there was something different. Excitement, panic, almost mania. The wooden stairs shook as Mason ran down. I stayed at the top landing, holding my breath. A minute of silence. Then suddenly shouts exploded. "No way! Oh my God! No way! We won, Mason! $85 million. $85 million. I looked down and saw Belle clutching the lottery ticket, trembling with excitement. Mason hugged her, laughing and repeating, "I can't believe it! I can't believe it!" They both jumped up and down, tears streaming over young, hungry faces. And I, the one who bought that very ticket yesterday with the numbers I've used for 20 years, each one a family birthday, stood frozen. My heart sank, not because of the money, but because they never asked, "Mom, is this your ticket?" I stepped halfway down the stairs, about to speak, when Belle turned, eyes blazing like someone who'd just found buried treasure. "We're rich, Mason. Finally, we don't have to live in this old house anymore." She said it and kissed the ticket like a trophy. I stopped. The words, "this old house," stabbed right through me, the home Arthur and I built with every saved dollar, every extra shift, every can of paint we rolled on with our own hands. I wanted to say I was the one who bought that ticket at the corner convenience store, but the words stuck in my throat. I looked at Mason, my only son, hoping he'd realize something, but he just stood there letting Belle call the shots like always. I went back to my small room in the attic, heavy-hearted. I brewed tea, but my hands shook so hard I spilled water on the table. For the first time in years, I felt like a stranger in my own home. About an hour later, I heard cars pulling up, nosy neighbors arriving after hearing about the lottery, family laughter, doors slamming, glasses clinking. I looked out the window and saw Belle showing off, waving the ticket, and Mason beside her, smiling awkwardly. By noon, there was a hard knock on my door. Belle stood there, arms crossed, lips curled. "Start packing. We're moving and we don't need any dead weight coming along." I didn't grasp it at first. "Dead weight," I repeated, voice barely audible. "Yeah, we're buying a mansion. It wouldn't make sense for you to come. At your age, it's better to find a decent nursing home. They'll take care of you there." I looked her in the eye. "This is my house, Belle." "Used to be, Lorraine," she said, emphasizing each word. "Now we have a new life and you're not part of it." Then she yanked open the closet and started throwing my things, dresses, the wedding photo, a pottery vase I made when I was young. Everything went crashing into the yard below. I stood there silent while neighbors gathered and whispered. Mason stood on the threshold, hands in his pockets, face pale, but he didn't step in to stop his wife. "Belle, stop," he muttered, but she didn't listen. "We don't need to do charity for you anymore," she shouted as if she wanted the whole neighborhood to hear. The words felt like a knife in my chest. I quietly bent down, picked up the shattered frame, and wiped the dust off with my sleeve. The elderly neighbor across the street hurried over to help me gather things, but I stopped her. "Thank you, but I can do it." I collected what was still intact, a few changes of clothes, a wedding photo, and a small box holding Arthur's ring. When a beat-up yellow cab pulled up, I stood, took a long breath. I turned to Mason, my son, whom I'd once believed would protect his mother for life. "You're not going to say anything?" I asked, calm and firm. He looked down. Belle just went a little too far, Mom. No, Mason, I said. This is the choice you two made. I walked toward the gate, then stopped. Belle stood there, arms crossed, still wearing that triumphant smile. I looked straight at her. Did you read the name on the back of the ticket? For a split second, that smile stalled. A flicker of doubt crossed her eyes. Then she quickly feigned disdain. I have no idea what you're talking about. I didn't answer. I opened the cab door, put my suitcase in the trunk, and told the driver softly, anywhere with the cheapest rooms nearby. As the car pulled away, I checked the rearview mirror. Mason stood frozen on the steps. The two little ones pressed to the upstairs window, eyes red. Belle turned away, pretending to be on the phone, but I could see her shoulders tighten. The room I rented sat above a Chinese restaurant. It barely fit a twin bed, a wobbly wooden table, and a window stuck in its frame. The smell of frying oil rose from downstairs, seeping into my hair and clothes. I sat on the edge of the bed, opened my bag, and took out a paper folded in quarters, the purchase receipt. The scrolled Lorraine Whitmore in the signature box was still clear. I ran my finger over the name and heard Arthur's voice in my ear. Always sign your name Lorraine. People can forget everything else, but a signature never lies. I smiled faintly. Outside the city buzzed, but in that tiny room I felt a strange peace. They thought I'd lost, but really the game had only just begun. After Arthur was laid to rest, the house was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking all night. I missed him, his tall, slender frame, the way he grumbled when I added extra salt to the stew, and that raspy laugh every early morning. Widowhood at 56 taught me to speak less and keep small rituals to feel like he was still around, pouring 2 cups of coffee each morning, straightening the armchair by the fireplace, sometimes whispering, I'm okay, Arthur. Then, one February night in a downpour, Mason showed up. He stood on the porch, soaked, gripping a suitcase. Behind him was Belle makeup, smeared eyes red. Mom, we lost the apartment. My company folded. The landlord wants rent now. We can't swing it. I opened the door without further questions and nodded. Come in. This house always has room for you. Belle thanked me, voice trembling. She was young, beautiful, and knew how to draw sympathy. That day I believed I was doing the right thing. I couldn't have imagined that Mason's just a few months would stretch into 7 years. 7 years of being the help in the very house with my name on the deed. At first things seemed fine. I gave them the big downstairs room, the one Arthur loved for its east-facing windows. Morning sun is good for the baby, I said. Mason squeezed my hand and smiled. Thanks, Mom. I'll pay you back soon. But soon never came. After Ava was born, then Micah 2 years later, Belle didn't return to work. Mason bounced between jobs, some months bringing home nothing. I covered every utility bill, groceries, and the homeowner's insurance with my teacher's pension, and what little savings of Arthur's remained. I didn't regret it. I believed family love balances itself, that when they got stable, they'd lift me up in return. I remembered Arthur's words before he died. If you can, don't let our kid know hunger, Lorraine. So I did everything to keep the house warm. Mornings I woke at 5:00 a.m., made breakfast for everyone, packed Mason's lunch, and took Ava to preschool. Afternoons I did laundry, cooked dinner, and rocked Micah to sleep. Everything ran like a clock I wound with my own hands. Then one day Belle said, Mom, I need a quiet place to work. My old company's letting me do consulting from home. Maybe you could move up to the attic. I'll turn your room into a home office. I hesitated. The attic was a storage space, low ceiling and sweltering in summer. But she said it in that syrupy tone. It's more private up there. You can rest without the kids making noise. I forced a smile. If it's convenient for you, do it. I didn't know that decision pushed me to the top floor of my own house and pushed me out of the role of mother in my family. From then on, I officially became Miss Lorraine upstairs. Belle reorganized the kitchen and labeled everything top shelf for the kids, bottom shelf for Mason's snacks. That cabinet is where you can keep your tea. I didn't object, but I felt like a boarder. That winter, she started hosting adults-only dinners. I still cooked and set the table. But when dinner began, Belle would smile and say, Mom, I saved you a plate in the kitchen. We need to discuss work. I stepped out, closed the kitchen door, and ate alone under the yellow light. From the living room came laughter, clinking glasses, and Belle talking like the lady of the house. I kept telling myself, it's fine. They're young. They have their own lives. I just need to stay quiet. But silence, when long enough, becomes shackles. When Ava started talking, Belle taught her to call me Miss Lorraine instead of Grandma. "Grandma sounds odd in the mouth, Mom," she said. "Miss Lorraine is younger and more polite." I laughed it off, but that night I cried in the bathroom. The next day I still made my granddaughter's milk as if nothing had happened. In the 3rd year, Mason switched to part-time engineering. I asked about his pay. He avoided my eyes. "Enough to get by, Mom." I knew it wasn't true, but didn't press. When your child looks down out of shame, a mother often chooses to pretend not to see. I kept paying for electricity, water, health insurance, and sometimes slipped in extra for Ava's tuition. I told myself I could shoulder it as long as they stayed afloat. By the 4th year, Belle began setting rules. "Mom, no sweets for the kids at night. Mom, the house needs to be spotless. Guests are coming. Mom, towels should be folded this way, not the old way." Each thing sounded small, but together they nicked like 1,000 paper cuts. I listened. I did. I swallowed it. Once I made Arthur's favorite stew. The smell filled the kitchen. Mason breathed in deeply. "Man, it's been a while." Belle frowned. "Red meat is full of cholesterol, Mason. You don't want to die young like your dad, do you?" The table fell silent. I looked down at my plate and murmured, "Your dad ate this up to 85 and was still healthy." She smirked. "Different times, Mom." After that dinner, I understood. In this house, I was no longer allowed to cook from memory. Mason wasn't heartless, just weak. When I said Belle was going too far, he sighed. "She's under a lot of pressure, Mom. I'm gone all day and she's home with 2 kids. And I'm taking care of the whole house," I wanted to say, but didn't. Sometimes I overheard Belle on the phone with friends. "I'm living with my mother-in-law. It's so hard. She interferes in everything." Each time I wondered who she was talking about because I hardly meddled in anything anymore. I just quietly cleaned, did laundry, and recorded expenses in a small notebook. I still remember a spring morning. I was hanging laundry in the backyard when I heard Belle in the kitchen telling Mason, "Do you know how people see us, a married couple living off his old mother? I want a place of our own, but Mom pays the homeowner's insurance here. Selling's not that simple." "Then have her sign the transfer. She doesn't need a big house anyway." I stood behind the curtain, heart pounding not from fear, but because I realized I'd given them too much piece by piece until they believed everything they had was theirs by right. That summer I started journaling. Every night I opened an old leather notebook. The first line was always the same, "Day of Patience." I didn't write much more, just small notes. Belle nagged about towels. Mason forgot to pick up Ava. Micah was sick. I stayed up all night. Tiny crooked lines like the trace of someone fading from her own life. Even so, one thing in me never went out: tenderness. I loved Mason, the boy who used to carry me piggyback when my back hurt. I loved the 2 little ones who laughed every time I baked cookies. I even loved Belle, though she hurt me. Maybe because I believed people can change, that one day they'd understand I did everything out of love. But patience has limits. And what broke it wasn't a big fight, just a small thing. So small that if I told it, people might think I was overreacting. Yet I remember that afternoon, perfectly sunlight slanting through the window, when Belle said one sentence that completely shattered my endurance. Ava's 10th birthday came on a bright April day, the yard filled with azalea scent. I still remember her eyes when she pointed to the sign in the sporting goods store, a turquoise bicycle with a white wicker basket and shimmering streamers trailing in the wind. "Grandma, if I had that bike, I'd never be late for school again." She beamed. I smiled too, with a knot in my chest. I knew the price of that bike, $200, almost all of what was left of my pension after paying that month's bills. I hesitated many times, then still decided to buy it. I saved every spare coin, cut my spending for weeks, even gave up my favorite almond milk. She's only 10 once, I told myself. And sometimes one gift can make a childhood feel complete. 3 days before Ava's birthday, I quietly walked to the shop in town. The clerk, a curly-haired kid, helped me pick the exact turquoise bike she loved. I asked for silver wrapping paper with sunflowers printed on it, tied with a white bow. When the paper caught the sunlight, I smiled, picturing my granddaughter's shining face. I hid the bike in the garage and threw an old cloth over it. I couldn't sleep all night, replaying the moment Ava would see it. Arthur would have smiled if he were still here. He used to say, "Sometimes the smallest gift becomes the biggest memory." I wanted to give her a memory like that. On the morning of her birthday, I got up earlier than usual. I made heart-shaped pancakes topped with strawberries and whipped cream. The kitchen smelled wonderful. I hung a few balloons by the window and set a vase of white roses in the center of the table. The house rarely felt that cheerful. I put on the old blue dress Arthur once complimented and felt a few years younger. Ava ran down the stairs, blonde pigtails bouncing, clapping, and singing. "It's my birthday, Grandma, you remembered." I opened my arms and hugged her. "Of course, sweetheart. I have a surprise for you." I hadn't finished the sentence when Belle walked in, wrinkled pajamas, hair pinned high. She looked around, frowning at the balloons and strawberries. "Mom, what is all this?" "I said we didn't need to make a big deal. It's just breakfast for Ava." "It didn't cost much," I answered gently. She opened the fridge, poured a glass of orange juice, then turned back, voice syrupy. "You know, Mason and I already agreed this year we want to teach her about saving. No expensive gifts. We want her to understand the value of money." I looked at Ava and saw her smile dim. I tried to stay calm. "Don't worry, I only got a small present, nothing extravagant." Belle raised an eyebrow. "Small, huh?" I smiled. "You'll see tonight." She stayed quiet, but her eyes were wary. I knew Belle didn't like me doing anything that might make her look less in front of the kids. With her, everything I did had an angle. That afternoon, when Mason brought the kids home from school, I took out the garage key. "Ava, come here with Grandma," I called. She ran over, eyes lighting up as I pulled back the cloth to reveal the shimmering turquoise bike. "Oh my gosh, it's beautiful." Ava gasped, almost breathless. "Is it really mine, Grandma?" I nodded. "Happy birthday, my little angel." She threw her arms around me, laughing and crying at the same time. My heart melted with happiness, but the moment lasted only seconds. Belle's voice cut in behind us, cold as steel. "What is this?" She came closer, eyes raking over the bike, then stared straight at me. "I told you, Mom, no expensive gifts." I stayed calm. "It's just a bike, Belle. She's dreamed about it all year." "That's not the point. The point is you're breaking our parenting rules." "Rules," I repeated with a small smile. "I don't recall love having rules." She stepped in, voice low and sharp as a blade. "You did this just to show the kids you're better than me, didn't you?" "Belle, don't be ridiculous," Mason chimed in, but his voice was weak. I looked at her. "I did it because I love my granddaughter. That's all." Ava gripped my hand, frightened by her parents arguing. "Mom, please, I'll clean the bike myself. I won't ask for any more presents." She sobbed, but Belle just sighed, then crouched to Ava's eye level. "Sweetie, we just want you to learn to appreciate things. This bike isn't right. Grandma will return it, and then you'll understand why grown-ups have to save." "No." Ava burst into tears. I held her, feeling her little heart thudding against my chest. "That's enough, Belle," I said, my voice tight. "If you want to teach a lesson, use your own money, not her joy." She only pressed her lips together and pulled out her phone. "Mom, return the bike or I will. I'm not joking." That afternoon, I walked the bike back to the store, each step heavy as stone. The wind rustled through the trees, making the white bow flutter and whisper like Ava's laughter that morning. I took one last look before stepping inside and drew a deep breath. "I'd like to return this bike," I told the curly-haired clerk. "Are you sure, ma'am? It's our last one?" "Yes." The little girl changed her mind. When I signed the refund slip, my hand shook so much the ink smeared. I folded the receipt and tucked it into my wallet. As I left, a light rain started. Cold drops hit my cheeks, mixing with the salty taste at the corner of my mouth. That night, the house was quiet. No cake, no candles, just the TV murmuring in the living room. I set out the small cake. I'd already bought a simple vanilla butter cake on the kitchen table and placed the card I'd written. "Happy birthday, Ava. Love you always, Grandma." Then I lit a tiny candle and watched it burn down, the flicker reflecting on Arthur's photo on the wall. "Do you see this?" I whispered. "Our granddaughter isn't allowed to receive a bicycle because of a lesson on saving. I don't have enough say in my own house anymore." I stood, put on my coat, and stepped outside. The April night was colder than I expected. The corner store cast a dim yellow glow, the one where I usually bought milk. I had no plan, just knew I needed air. The shop was nearly empty. The owner, a familiar Italian gentleman, smiled. "Cold night, Miss Lorraine. Still want coffee?" I shook my head. Then my eyes stopped at the lottery counter next to the register. A small sign read, "Jackpot, tomorrow night, 85 million. I gave a tired, wry smile. "One ticket, please, with these numbers." I slowly read the familiar sequence: 10, 14, 21, 25, 30, 41, 47. Birthdays for Arthur, me Mason and the 2 kids. The numbers I'd played for 20 years. An old habit that never meant much. I pulled out a pen and signed the back. Lorraine Whitmore. Arthur's old rule. Always sign and keep the receipt. Lorraine. People can argue plenty, but they can't fake a signature. I smiled at the owner, slid the ticket and receipt into my coat pocket. I could use a little luck tonight. Hope you get what you're wishing for, he replied. On the way home, I looked at the lit windows in the dark and wondered how many people inside were as tired as I was, still trying to believe in good, even when hurt by their own family. I wasn't hoping for wealth. I was asking for one simple thing, a way out. When I got home, I placed the ticket and receipt on the kitchen table, right where anyone could see, as if laying down a quiet prayer to the universe. Then I went up to the attic and listened to the rain tapping on the roof. The next morning, as the first light slipped through the window, I heard Belle shriek downstairs, her voice high with excitement. "Mason, wake up now, we won!" Rushed footsteps, then a burst of laughter, quick kisses, a chair scraping. 85 million! Oh my God, we won 85 million! I sat up, heart pounding. I didn't need to look to know which ticket they were holding. I stepped onto the stairs and looked down at a scene both familiar and strange, Belle clinging to Mason, tears of joy. The ticket held high, the ticket I had bought. "I can't believe it. Who'd have thought?" Just picked it up off the table and our lives changed, Belle yelled, buzzing with excitement. "Maybe someone forgot it, but it's ours now." Mason laughed, hugging her tight. I stood still on the staircase. What started with a returned bicycle was turning into a storm I'd never imagined. I said nothing. I just watched the 2 people I'd supported for 7 years dancing around my kitchen as if fate had handed them a reward. I closed my eyes and told myself, "Stay quiet, Lorraine. Let them think they've won." I wanted to see how far their greed would take them, and whether on that road they'd have enough conscience to realize the ticket was never theirs. The hours passed in a blur. Neighbors came knocking, phones rang non-stop, and Belle's voice grew louder with each passing minute. I watched from my attic window as she posed for photos, the ticket clutched tightly in her manicured fingers. She'd smile and say, "It's like a dream come true for our family." Our family. The words tasted bitter in my mouth. I hadn't been considered family when I was paying the bills, cooking the meals, or raising her children. But now, with 85 million on the line, I was suddenly part of our family again. Around noon, heavy footsteps climbed the attic stairs. My door flew open without a knock. Belle stood there, a glow of triumph radiating from her face. Her designer blouse, brand new, I guessed, hung loosely on her frame. "We need to talk about arrangements," she said, her voice attempting kindness but failing. "With the money coming in, we've already put deposits on a new house. A mansion, actually, on Tanner Island." I sat very still on my bed, watching her carefully. "I see. It's just..." She glanced around my small attic room at the sloped ceiling and cramped dresser. "This lifestyle isn't appropriate for us anymore. Not for lottery winners." I nodded slowly, saying nothing. Her patience thinned. "Lorraine, you need to start packing. Today." "Packing?" "Yes." A flash of irritation crossed her face. "We're moving to the new house, and, well, you're not coming with us." The words hung in the air between us. I'd known this moment was coming, but hearing it aloud still felt like a punch to the stomach. "This is my house, Belle," I said softly. "Where exactly do you expect me to go?" She gave me a tight smile. "We've looked into some very nice retirement communities, places where people your age can be properly cared for. You don't need this big house anymore. It's actually a burden at your age." "A burden I've been carrying for 7 years while supporting all of you," I replied, my voice even. Her smile vanished. "Let's not dredge up the past, Lorraine. Things are changing now. We need to think about what's best for the family going forward." Before I could respond, she strode to my closet and flung open the doors. "You should start with the essentials. The nursing home rooms aren't very big." "Nursing home?" I felt the color drain from my face. "I don't need a nursing home, Belle." "Of course you do. You're getting older. You need assistance." "I've been running this household alone for years." She ignored me, pulling dresses from hangers, tossing them onto the bed. "These are so outdated anyway. Maybe it's time for a fresh start." I stood up, my knees surprisingly steady. "Stop this. Right now." But Belle was beyond listening. She moved to my dresser, yanking open drawers, pulling out the carefully folded clothes I'd maintained for years. "We're doing you a favor, really. No more cooking, no more cleaning. They'll take care of everything." I watched her, this woman who had lived under my roof, eaten my food, accepted my care for her children, now treating my possessions with such disregard. "Belle," I said, "stop." She turned Arthur's framed photograph in her hands, the one from our 30th anniversary. "Oh, this old thing you probably don't need. Put that down." My voice came out stronger than I expected, filling the small room. For a moment she seemed startled by my tone. Then her eyes narrowed. "Don't you raise your voice at me. Not in my house." "Your house?" The audacity of it struck me speechless. "Yes, my house now. Our house. Mason's and mine. The lottery winner's house." She stepped closer, voice dropping to a hiss. "Not the charity case's house anymore." I held my ground. "The deed has my name on it." "For now," she smirked. "But we have $85 million, Lorraine. Do you know what kind of lawyers that can buy?" With that, she turned and swept the contents of my dresser into a large plastic bag. Photographs, keepsakes, the jewelry box Arthur had carved for me on our 5th anniversary, all dumped without care. Then she moved to the window, threw it open, and without hesitation emptied the bag into the yard below. I gasped, rushing to the window. My clothes scattered across the lawn, personal items bouncing on the concrete path. Neighbors who had gathered to congratulate the lottery winners now stood frozen, watching my life being tossed out like garbage. "Belle?" Mason's voice called from downstairs. "What are you doing up there?" She leaned out the window, calling back cheerfully. "Just helping your mother pack honey. She's moving to Sunset Gardens." I stared at her, this stranger who had systematically dismantled my place in my own home. "You can't do this." "I already am," she replied, reaching for another drawer. "And honestly, Lorraine, you should be grateful. Most mothers-in-law don't get this kind of consideration." Consideration. The word hung in the air like a bad joke. "Belle, that's enough." Mason appeared in the doorway, looking uncomfortable but not stopping her. She barely glanced at him. "I'm just helping Mason. Your mother needs to understand that things are different now." I looked at my son, searching his face for any sign of the boy I'd raised, the one who once promised to take care of me in my old age. "Mason?" He couldn't meet my eyes. "Mom, Belle's just excited about the win. We'll find you somewhere nice." "Somewhere nice." I repeated the words hollow. "You're throwing me out of my own home, and that's all you have to say." Belle grabbed another armful of my possessions, heading for the window. "It's not personal, Lorraine. It's practical." As she tossed my things to the yard below, I heard the shattering of glass, the small crystal vase Arthur had given me on our 1st anniversary. 7 years of patience finally snapped inside me. I walked downstairs with as much dignity as I could muster out the front door and into the yard where my life lay scattered. The neighbors watched, some with pity, others with morbid fascination. I knelt slowly, picking up what I could salvage, a few unbroken photographs, some clothes, Arthur's ring still safe in its box. Mason came out, hovering awkwardly on the porch. "Mom, I'm sorry about the way she's doing this, but maybe it is for the best. We can find you somewhere comfortable." "Comfortable?" I looked up at him, this stranger wearing my son's face. "Is this how I raised you to treat your mother?" He shifted uncomfortably. "It's not like that. It's just, with the money now we can afford to give you better care." "I don't need care, Mason. I need respect." Belle appeared behind him, arms crossed triumphantly. "The cab will be here soon, Lorraine. I've already called them." As if on cue, a yellow taxi pulled up to the curb. The driver, an older man with kind eyes, looked confused at the scene. A woman kneeling among scattered possessions, neighbors, whispering on the sidewalk. I gathered what dignity I had left, stood up straight, and faced my son one last time. "You're not going to say anything. You're just going to let her do this." Mason looked down at his feet. "Belle just went a little too far, Mom. But maybe it is time for a change." The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible. "No, Mason," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "This is the choice you two made." I walked toward the cab, clutching the few salvaged items to my chest. But as I reached the gate, I turned back. Belle stood there, arms crossed, triumph gleaming in her eyes. "Did you read the name on the back of the ticket?" I asked quietly. For just a moment, uncertainty flickered across her face. Then she recovered, tossing her hair. "I have no idea what you're talking about." I said nothing more, just turned and walked to the waiting cab. As I settled into the back seat, I told the driver, Anywhere with the cheapest rooms nearby. The cab pulled away from the curb and I forced myself not to look back. But in the rearview mirror, I caught one last glimpse, Mason frozen on the porch, the children's faces pressed against an upstairs window, and Belle, her phone already at her ear, her shoulders suddenly tense. The room above Wong's Chinese restaurant was all I could afford, a cramped space with a sagging twin bed, a wooden table that wobbled on uneven legs, and a window that had been painted shut years ago. The smell of cooking oil permeated everything, but it was clean, and most importantly, mine. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my purse, carefully extracting the folded lottery receipt. There it was in black and white, Lorraine Whitmore, signed clearly on the purchase slip, the date and timestamp from Benny's Corner Mart still visible, the matching serial number. I traced my finger over my signature, hearing Arthur's voice as clearly as if he were sitting beside me. Always sign your name, Lorraine. People can forget everything else, but a signature never lies. A small smile touched my lips. Outside, the city continued its endless noise, cars honking, people shouting, life carrying on. But in this tiny room, a curious peace settled over me. Belle and Mason thought they had won, but they'd missed the most important detail. I carefully placed the receipt back in my purse and looked at Arthur's photograph, somehow undamaged, despite the fall from the window. "Well, Arthur," I whispered, "it seems we have an interesting road ahead." The path was clear now. No more cooking their meals, cleaning their messes, or paying their bills. No more shrinking myself to fit into corners of my own home. They had made their choice, and in doing so they had freed me to make mine. I opened the window as far as it would go, letting the evening air wash over me. 7 years of patience had ended today, but something new was beginning. They had the house, but I had the truth. And soon enough they would learn that sometimes the quietest person in the room holds all the power. 3 days after they won, the phone in my rented room rang off the hook at 7 a.m. I didn't pick up in time before it rang again, urgent, as if someone were racing the clock. "This is Grant Halloway, counsel for the Georgia State Lottery. I need to verify a few details about the lottery ticket registered to Lorraine Whitmore." "Is now a good time?" a calm baritone said. I paused, heart quickening. "Yes, I'm the one who bought that ticket." Papers rustled on his end. "We've matched the signature serial number in our system records. The ticket was registered under the name Lorraine Whitmore, former Savannah address." Correct. "Then congratulations. You're the grand prize winner, $85 million. I was quiet for a few seconds. Not because I was surprised, but because a strange feeling rose in me. Not exactly joy, not shock. More like when a storm you saw from miles away finally arrives. Mr. Halloway continued, his tone turning serious. "But I need you to be aware third parties have contacted the commission claiming to be the real owner of the ticket. A woman named Belle Carter Whitmore." I closed my eyes and smiled. I'm guessing she didn't forget the hyphenated last name. "Not at all," he said, a bit surprised at my composure. "She claims the ticket was bought with marital funds, and that you, pardon my bluntness, are no longer competent to manage assets." I let out a small laugh. "Steady, they haven't changed. When they can't take something, they try to convince others I'm not smart enough to keep it." I heard typing on his end. "Could you confirm a few items so we can protect your legal rights? The back signature, your ID number, and proof of purchase time." I opened my wallet and pulled out the receipt I'd sealed between 2 laminates. "I have the receipt. Benny's Corner Mart. Purchase time 7:43 p.m., Friday, April 12th. The serial number matches the ticket. I also have copies of my ID, and the store camera will show it." I spoke clearly, without a hint of hesitation. On the other end, Halloway's voice dropped, impressed. "Excellent. That's sufficient to affirm you as the lawful owner. However, I should warn you, these folks seem ready to cause trouble. They may push rumors that you're confused or even forge medical records." I sighed, but didn't waver. "Don't worry, I'm used to their labeling games. In my life, I've had many tags. Weak, stubborn, old-fashioned. One more won't matter." A beat of silence, then he said slowly, "You're the calmest person I've ever told they've won $85 million. I gave a small smile, because to me the real prize isn't the money, it's the truth. When you've lived without power in your own home for 7 years, regaining it feels more valuable than any number. Before ending the call, he reminded me, "The claim window is 10 days from today. If you need it, we can arrange security or independent financial advisors." I thanked him, then said, "I'll make arrangements, but give me a few days. I want to see how far their performance goes." After the call, I sat still for a long time. Morning light slipped through the small window and washed over the peeling gray wall. I felt caught between two worlds. On one side, the shabby room that smelled like fryer oil. On the other, the people who just declared themselves millionaires with my money. I pulled out my old notebook and wrote a few lines. Day 1 after the win. I'm still poor but richer than they are. In one way, I still have my self-respect. I closed the notebook and dialed Penelope Banks, my neighbor of 30 years. Penelope is the kind of woman everyone respects. Serious, fair, and allergic to show-offs. Lorraine, good Lord, where are you? The whole neighborhood's talking about your lottery win. I knocked a few times and only saw your daughter-in-law. She said you went on vacation. I laughed. Yeah, I'm on vacation somewhere with no air conditioning, no pillows, and a smell of grease in my hair. What on earth, Pen, I need a favor. Watch the house for a few days. Note dates, plates, what cars show up. I want to see how fast they burn through cash. Penelope was quiet a few seconds, then asked softly, What are you going to do, Lorraine? I'm not going to do anything, I said lightly. I just want the truth to surface at the right time in the right place, somewhere everyone can see it. In the afternoon, I stopped by First Southern Bank and opened a small safe deposit box. The young teller asked, What will you be storing, ma'am? My future, I said, placing inside the original receipt a photocopy of the ticket and copies of my ID. I kept scans and a few photos on my phone. I've learned that sometimes justice needs to be kept in more than one drawer. As I left the bank, I caught my reflection in the glass. An older woman with silver hair, a gray cardigan, and an oddly steady gaze. Arthur used to tell me, You're gentle, but when pushed, you turn into ice. Today, I understood he was right. I walked back and stopped at a sidewalk cafe. It was small, with just a few people reading the paper. I ordered a hot black coffee, pulled out my notebook, and began to write. Saturday, 10:00 a.m. They still think I'm weak. They don't know the ticket has already spoken for me. I'm not running. I'm preparing. Every lie is a trap, and all I have to do is wait for the snap. That evening, when the city lights came on, I got the first text from Mason. Mom, we want to talk. Belle is stressed. Don't believe what the papers are saying. The papers. I opened my phone, and sure enough, a local site had posted, Savannah couple wins jackpot. Elderly mother gifts ticket to her son, then disappears. I laughed out loud. Even their lies are clumsy, I murmured. Congratulations, Belle. You just publicly admitted I bought the ticket. I texted Mason back. Don't worry. I'm not missing. I'm just seeing clearly who's genuine and who isn't. Then I turned off my phone and lay back on the bed. Rain ticked against the window. I didn't know where they were. Maybe touring mansions, maybe ordering a new car, maybe planning a millionaire party. But I knew one thing: the rules had changed. From the moment the signature Lorraine Whitmore appeared on the back of the ticket, they could lie. They could threaten, but they couldn't erase the truth. I put my hand on the notebook and wrote one last line before turning out the light. Tomorrow, when they buy more cars, more dresses, more lies. I'll just smile, because this game isn't about money, it's about character. I used to think greed only shows when people are desperate. Turns out it grows even bigger when they get something they never deserved. Just 3 days after the win, Belle started performing like a star. She made a new social media account called The Lucky Whitmores. On flashy live streams, she wore an ivory silk dress, held a glass of wine, and smiled sweet as sugar. Life can be very fair, she told thousands of viewers. If you do the right thing, the universe will send a reward. I watched that video on my old phone in the rented room, half amused and half heartsick. Because in that line about the universe rewarding people who do the right thing, Belle was implying I was the opposite, an old senile freeloader living off her kids. On her live stream, she said, my mother-in-law once promised to gift the ticket to the family, and we didn't want to accept it, but she insisted. Every line was crafted to sound grateful while planting doubt. I read the comments below. So lucky to have such a generous mother-in-law. She must really love her daughter-in-law. And one that stung my eyes. Hope the old lady doesn't try to take back what she gave. They didn't know. They hadn't seen Belle's real face, but they would. That morning, Penelope called. Lorraine, you won't believe it. The whole neighborhood is buzzing about your house, furniture trucks, flower deliveries. Even a brand new SUV parked right out front. The dealer sticker's still on. I chuckled. I believe it, Pen. I even know the color black with a silver sheen. Sporty model, right? She burst out laughing. Exactly, you're psychic. No need to guess, Pen. With Belle, the bigger the better as long as someone is watching. At noon, Penelope sent photos. Belle posing at the front door, holding a bouquet of white roses next to a sign that read, "The Whitmore Residence." Mason forced a smile beside her while the two kids were dressed in matching white outfits, more like ad models than children. White roses. Arthur used to say, "Nothing is emptier than a white rose beautiful, but no scent." I've never heard a truer line. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Belle. Her voice was candy sweet, nothing like the tone of someone who'd thrown me out of my own house. "Miss Lorraine, I just want a gentle chat. We're family, right?" I stayed silent. "About the ticket," she went on. "There's probably a small mix-up. I just need you to sign a brief confirmation that it isn't yours. It's only to help the bank process things faster." I gave a small laugh. "Belle, when did you read the name on the back of the ticket?" Dead silence on the other end. The pause stretched so long I could hear her breathing quicken. Then she changed the subject. "People online are saying you're not in a stable situation. I'm just worried someone might take advantage of you." I cut in. "Thanks for the concern, but the only person who's ever taken advantage of me is the one on this call." I hung up, and when I looked out the window, rain began to fall, each drop tapping the foggy glass like a signal that a storm was coming. The next night, an email came from Attorney Halloway. "Miss Lorraine, we just received a letter from the law office of Carter Whitmore Family Holdings. It alleges you lack the financial and mental capacity to manage assets and requests that financial guardianship be transferred to your son Mason Whitmore." I wasn't surprised. I knew Belle would play this card attacking with the senile mother image she'd seated in public. Still, I asked, "What do you think Halloway—" He gave a short, dry laugh. "I think it's a bad play. They don't understand the law. Your signature, the original receipt, the purchase data, they're all solid. If they push this, they'll cause trouble for themselves." "Then let them keep going," I said. "The farther they walk, the more footprints they leave." The next day, Penelope called again, voice lowered to a near whisper. "Lorraine, I've heard them arguing all afternoon. Mason yelled, 'Stop it. This is my mother.' And Belle screamed, 'No way. If you don't take my side, you lose everything.'" I closed my eyes. Mason's image flashed in my mind, the little boy who once pedaled his bike around the yard, who promised, "I'll protect you forever, Mom." Now he was stuck between his mother and a wife, draining his soul. I didn't blame him. I was just sad. Sometimes love can make people blind. I lit a small candle and placed it by Arthur's photo on the table. The light washed over his gentle, steady face, just like before. "Do you see this, Arthur?" I whispered. "I did what you asked. I'm not bowing my head anymore. I'll stand tall, even if I'm standing alone." I sat a long time watching the flame tremble. Every time a draft slipped through the doorframe, the flame wavered but didn't go out. In it, I saw myself maybe shaky but still shining. I opened my notebook and wrote a new page. May 3rd. The money will arrive tomorrow, but they've already spent it. Deposits on 2 cars, down payment on a mansion on Tanner Island, signed a furniture contract, even paid for a Europe trip, all from a pending funds account. They said the money would arrive soon. Late that night, Mason finally called. His voice was thin, stretchy, like pulled taffy. "Mom, we need to talk about this. The ticket. The money." I sat on the old plastic chair and listened, each word cutting like a blade. "So," I asked quietly, "you spent money you didn't have?" Mason was silent. I thought he'd make excuses, but he didn't. Just a sigh and a faint rustle like he was raking his hand through his hair. I closed my eyes. Mason for 7 years, who paid the electric bill, the water, the insurance, the kids' schooling. No answer. I repeated slower, "Who Mason?" After a heavy few seconds, he said softly, "You did." "Right," I said. "Me. The person you said was living off you. The one thrown out of her own house. The one labeled not competent. And now you're calling to ask if the ticket is mine." Mason's voice shook. I didn't know Belle would do that. She said she thought you wouldn't." "Take it back." I gave a small, bitter laugh. "She doesn't understand me, Mason. I can forgive being poor. I can't forgive deception." I paused, then said slowly, "You want to talk, fine. Come to where I am. Today, 2:00 p.m. Mason was quiet. I heard an engine start on his end. "Mom, I'll come." "Good," I said. "But bring the truth. No gifts, no excuses. Just the truth." After the call, I looked around my little room. Not fancy, not tidy, but the only place still mine. The peeling wooden table, the old beige curtain, the slightly crooked plastic chair where I wrote every night. I wiped the dust off the chair, steadied its legs, then opened the window to let in the morning air with its mix of fryer oil and coffee from the restaurant downstairs. That smell used to bother me, but today it made me feel alive, like I'd stepped back into a real rhythm of living. No longer faking niceness to keep anyone happy. Before the meeting time, the phone rang again. It was Attorney Halloway. "Miss Whitmore," he said, "I've secured an identity verification and prize claim slot for you. 3:00 p.m. tomorrow at the main office. Please arrive 15 minutes early." I nodded even though he couldn't see me. "Thank you, Grant. This is almost over. Do you want us to alert the press?" "In cases like yours, the media is very interested." I answered, "Not yet. I want a few people to know the truth before the world does." After the call, I brewed a pot of peppermint tea. The fresh scent filled the room, blending with the soft noon light. I sat at the table, opened my notebook, and wrote one more line. "Monday, 1:45 p.m. My son will ask, 'Did you buy the ticket?' I will answer, 'Yes.' Maybe this morning, for the first time in 7 years, he will hear his mother's real voice." I closed the notebook and set it beside the cup. On the wall, an old family photo hung slightly crooked. In it, me, Arthur, and 5-year-old Mason stood in front of the first house we bought. Sunlight lit our faces, bright and peaceful. I touched the faded frame. "Art," I whispered. "If you were here, what would you do? Would you forgive him?" I answered myself in silence. "Maybe you would. I won't." I poured more water into the pot, and the steam fogged the window. Each bead on the glass reflected a memory. Mason's first day of school and the lunch I packed. Arthur laughing, saying the boy looked just like him. Then the funeral, the driving rain, and me standing alone as the casket was lowered. That day I promised to protect our son at all costs. But it turns out sometimes protecting means letting him face his own mistakes. It wasn't even 2:00 yet, but I was ready. I set the table, arranged 2 cups of tea and a small plate of cookies. Nothing fancy, just my habit. Older folks like me tend to make things comfortable before serious conversations. I threw the window wide so the light would fall across the tablecloth and make the room feel less gloomy. Outside, traffic was picking up. I heard kids laughing on the street and an older lady greeting customers at the cafe across the way. Life went on as usual while I was getting ready for the most important confrontation of my life, not in a courtroom, but with the son I brought into this world. I looked at the clock, 1:47. It wasn't time yet, but my heart was beating harder, not from fear, but from keeping myself steady. I wanted Mason to see clearly his mother is not the weak, confused woman Belle painted me to be. I wanted every word I said to carry the weight of a truth they had tried to bury. A breeze moved through, carrying the scent of mint out to the porch. I sat down, placed my hand on my notebook, and told myself, if he chooses conscience, I'll save him. If he chooses silence, let the law do the rest. I turned the teacup slightly and watched the little circles ripple across the surface. Each ring a symbol of 7 years of pressure, 7 years of endurance, 7 years of unconditional love. Now each ring was fading into the next, leaving the surface still like my heart before the storm. 1 more hour and Mason would walk through that door. I told myself, this time you won't only meet your mother, you'll meet the woman you and your wife woke up, the woman you should never have underestimated. I took the first sip of tea, the warmth sliding down my throat. Sunlight tilted across the old wall, leaving a soft band of light like a promise. Outside, a light breeze brushed the window frame, and the wind chime gave a gentle ring. I looked at the empty chair across from me and said out loud, "Son, I'm waiting." A knock sounded right at 2 p.m. Not early, not late. I stood feeling not nervous, but oddly as if I were about to preside over a hearing. The door opened. Mason stood there, pale hair mussed, eyes sunken. He glanced around the shabby room, the stained ceiling, the lopsided single bed, the damp in the corner, then looked back at me, voice tight. "I'm sorry, Mom." Just 4 words. But I knew he'd crossed a long night to say them. I didn't answer, just motioned to the chair I'd wiped down that morning. "Sit, Mason. This room isn't pretty, but at least it's mine." He lowered his head, avoiding my eyes. The dim light through the window cast our silhouettes across the blotchy wall, 2 figures close yet far. Not 5 minutes later, Belle showed up. Her heels struck sharp on the concrete. A sweet, biting perfume swamped the lingering fryer smell from downstairs. She swept in, scanned the room, and smirked. "Cozy, isn't it?" I calmly set my cup down. It's warm because there are no lies in here, Belle. She shrugged, perched on the edge of the bed, and pulled out her phone like she was at some fancy meeting. Mason looked from her to me. Awkward. I decided not to drag out the pretending. I'll be brief, I said. This morning the lottery's attorney confirmed it. The name on the ticket is Lorraine Whitmore. The payout account is set. The money will hit within 24 hours. The room went still. Mason swallowed. After a few seconds, Belle gave a thin laugh. So you plan to keep it all? I met her eyes. I plan to keep what's mine. Mason lifted a hand. Mom, I didn't come to fight. I just thought maybe we could make a deal like a family agreement so no one has to go to court. I smiled slightly sorrow from 7 buried years behind it. A deal, Mason. I've been making deals for 7 years. I dealt by staying silent when I was insulted. I dealt by paying the power bill when you were unemployed. I dealt by babysitting all day while your wife called me a freeloader. And the final deal, letting you throw my things out the window and saying nothing. Mason stared at his lap. Belle sat straight, expression flat. She gave a light, scripted chuckle. You misunderstand. I just think if we cooperate, everyone wins. We could buy a big house. You could live with us. Have your own private suite, your own little kitchen, your own bath. Every comfort. I lifted my head voice, cold as steel. A private suite in your estate. That's right, Belle said quickly, thinking I'd softened. Quiet, airy, private, just for you. I looked at her, letting my eyes settle on that fake smile. Sounds more like a dog kennel out back than a mother's room. She froze, color draining. Mason started to speak, but I raised a hand. Before we talk cooperation, I need answers. Short ones. I opened a drawer and took out a folded paper, the expense log I'd kept for 7 years. I laid it on the table. First question, I said, eyes on Belle. Who threw my things out the window that morning? She rolled her eyes. You know I just lost my temper a little. So you admit it. Second question, who called me a freeloader, a useless hanger-on? She gave a bitter smile. What do you want, an apology? I want the truth. And if you need a refresher, Mason was standing right there. He can confirm. Mason drew a breath, voice shaking. Mom. Yes. Belle said it. I heard everything. Belle snapped toward him, eyes blazing. What are you doing? I'm telling the truth, Mason said, and for the first time in years there was a little courage in his tone. The tiny room felt tight as a wire. Belle's hands were clenched white. I went on, quiet but clear. Thank you, Mason. You finally said what you should have said 7 years ago. I unfolded the paper and read, careful line by line. Electric bill $108 a month, 7 years. Water about $42. Roof repair in 2018, $1,400. Ava and Micah's school costs a total of $18,600. Groceries, medicine, household goods can't even count. I folded the paper and set it down. All from my pension. I'm not saying this to collect. I'm reminding you these numbers are evidence of kindness, not obligation. With no way to dodge, Belle started to fray. You think you're a saint? You give and now you're keeping score. If you don't sign a transfer, I'll sue you for asset fraud. Mason flinched. Belle, stop. But I was already on my feet, calmer than even I expected. I pointed to the door, still slightly open. You're free to leave, Belle. No threats, no theater. The court isn't far. Life will teach you for me. She shot up, eyes burning. You'll regret this. No, I cut in. You will. When you learn money can't buy 1 second of peace. When the kids start asking why grandma isn't home anymore, when your husband stops bowing his head, then you'll know who's truly pitiable. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her face went from red to white. Then, without a word, she turned heels, hammering the floor, and the door slammed like a gavel. Silence again. Just me and Mason. He bowed his head low. Mom, I don't know what to say. I let it go too far. I looked at my son, his face gaunt, but for the first time in years, his eyes held a little honesty. Just remember, I said low but gentle. Every mistake has a price. The only price I want from you is the truth. He nodded, eyes wet. Can you forgive me? I sighed softly. Forgiveness isn't forgetting Mason. It's remembering and choosing not to take revenge. I stood and set a hand on his shoulder. Now go take care of the kids. Tomorrow I'll claim the money. After that, we'll talk again if you still want a mother. Mason squeezed my hand, then left. When the door clicked shut, the room fell quiet. I sat and looked at the 2 teacups, one still warm, one gone cold. I knew the line between us was like those 2 cups. Once the same fragrance, no longer the same moment. I lit another candle and wrote in my notebook. This afternoon, the rented room became a courtroom. No judge, no jury, just conscience. That evening, Mason came back. Belle wasn't with him. It was just him, wrinkled shirt eyes, red from no sleep. I was in the same spot, the little wooden table with 2 cups of tea. As if time hadn't moved since the stormy afternoon, he stood at the door, unsure where to begin. I motioned for him to sit and said softly, "You don't need to explain any more, Mason. I understand. Now I want to talk about the future and the conditions for it to exist." He nodded, hands clenched until the knuckles went white. I poured tea and slid the cup toward him. "I will help you," I began, "but not for you, for Ava and Micah." He looked up, hope and shame mixed in his eyes. I spoke slowly, each word clear. "You put deposits on cars, a house, and silly luxuries I never needed. I can cover those. Consider it protecting the kids from the financial chaos their parents created." Mason started to thank me, but I held up a hand. "Don't thank me yet. I said I'd help, not forgive. Every bit of help comes with conditions, and you need to understand forgiveness is not a get-out-of-jail-free card." I met his eyes, my voice dropping. "First condition, you end this toxic marriage. No half measures, no stalling. If you let Belle drag you down, I'll pull all support. I won't bankroll anyone who chooses to live in the mud." Mason went still. I saw his shoulders tremble, but he didn't object. "Second condition," I continued. "You apologize publicly right on the front steps in front of the neighbors who watched you let your wife humiliate me. Not to make me feel good, but to make you learn responsibility through action, not tears." I paused, took a sip, then said the last part, the hardest for him. "Third condition, you go to counseling for single fathers. Not because I think you're weak, but because you need to relearn how to be a dad. Ava and Micah deserve a decent example, not a husband who stays silent when their mother is insulted." The air felt thick. Mason didn't speak for a full minute. Then he exhaled, voice small as if afraid to wake someone. "What about Belle?" I looked toward the window. The streetlights reflected on the glass, throwing a cold gold into the room. "She'll do what people like her always do. Scream, blame, threaten. And I'll let her. But if she wants a fight, I'm ready." As if on cue, a hard, rapid knock hit the door. I didn't need to guess who it was. The door swung open and Belle walked in, still beautiful but with clouded eyes, arms folded. She let out a razor-edged laugh. "Perfect. Mommy and son plotting again." Mason stood. "Belle, I told you to. Stay home so you can let her brainwash you." She turned to me, a curled, contemptuous smile. "What are you doing teaching him conscience, or is this emotional blackmail?" I stayed calm, letting none of her noise stir me. "I'm setting the terms for forgiveness, Belle, and you sadly aren't on the list." "Oh, really?" She arched a brow, voice sharper. "You think you can control my husband forever? I'll take full custody and half the assets. I have legal rights, and I know the law." I gave a small smile and answered evenly, no louder than conversation. "Then sue Belle. But remember, don't use my money to hire your lawyer." Silence stretched. In her eyes, I caught a flicker of confusion. Maybe the first time she'd met someone who wasn't afraid. Mason turned, put a hand on my shoulder, and said, voice rough, "Mom, I choose you and the kids." I didn't hug him or say more. I just nodded. Arthur's old words rang in my head. A man grows up when he faces consequences. Mason had stepped over that line, and I would let him walk it himself. Belle looked at her husband, eyes rimmed red. "You'll regret this." Mason didn't answer. His silence was the reply she refused to accept. She yanked the door, the metal clanging against the wall. "I won't let this go. You'll lose everything." Her voice cracked, split between hate and fear. I just watched her go and said, my voice low, "No, Belle, you're the one who's losing because you've thrown away the one thing money can't buy. Respect." "We'll see you in court. I'm not afraid." I smiled, light as a breeze. "Good, because this time the court won't just ask who's right. It'll ask who forgot how to be human." Belle spun on her heel. Her high heels hammered the metal stairs, echoing beat by beat, like a countdown to an oncoming legal storm. I sat still and listened until the sound faded, leaving only silence. Mason collapsed into the chair, head in his hands. "I don't even know where to start." "Start by keeping your word," I said. Tomorrow go apologize to Penelope and the neighbors who saw everything. Tell it all. No excuses. And from now on, you'll pay your own rent, your own tuition, every last bill. I can help, but I won't bankroll you anymore." He nodded. In those red-rimmed eyes, I saw a faint light, not the glow of someone forgiven, but of someone beginning to understand what starting over means. I stood and refilled his tea. "Drink it so you remember the taste of truth. Bitter at first, clean after." Mason took a small sip and gave a tiny nod. "I understand, Mom." Softly I answered, "No, Mason, you're learning to understand." The morning after Mason's visit, sunlight streamed through the thin curtains of my rented room. For the first time in years, I woke without a weight on my chest. I watched dust motes dance in the light and considered how much had changed in mere days. From a woman thrown out of her own home to the soon-to-be confirmed winner of $85 million. But the true victory wasn't the money, it was finding my voice again. I dressed carefully in a cream blouse and my best navy skirt clothes I'd salvaged from the yard. The lottery office would expect someone frantic with excitement. They'd get a woman at peace instead. Attorney Grant Halloway arrived precisely at 2:30 p.m., his silver sedan gleaming in the afternoon sun. He opened the car door with a formal little bow that reminded me of Arthur. "Ready for the official verification, Lorraine?" I stepped into the car with a nod. "I've been ready for 7 years, Grant. Today, I'm just reclaiming what's fair." As we drove, Savannah's streets glided by the old oak trees, historic buildings, tourists with their cameras. I'd lived here all my life, but never felt the city's beauty so keenly. "Freedom has a particular clarity to it," I murmured almost to myself. "I'm sorry," Grant glanced over. "Just thinking about new beginnings." The Georgia State Lottery headquarters rose like a gleaming blue monolith against the sky. Inside, everything was chrome glass and professionally neutral smiles. A receptionist led us to a verification room where a woman in a charcoal suit introduced herself as the special prize records manager. "Mrs. Whitmore, I understand you're here to claim ticket number 784539. She examined me with the practiced neutrality of someone who'd seen every type of winner from screaming teenagers to stone-faced retirees. "Yes." I removed the ticket from its protective sleeve and placed it on the table between us, along with the original purchase receipt and my identification. She slipped on white gloves before touching the ticket, examining it under a special light that made the paper glow blue. Next came fingerprint-matching serial number verification, and finally security camera footage from Benny's Corner Mart showing me purchasing and signing the ticket. "Signature match confirmed," she said, initialing a form. "Congratulations, Mrs. Whitmore. You are officially our jackpot winner." No trumpets sounded. No confetti fell. Just the quiet satisfaction of truth recognized. The manager slid a folder across the table. "These are your payout options. Take your time." I skimmed the document but had already made my decision. I'd like an initial lump sum for immediate needs. The remainder should go into a trust named the Arthur and Lorraine Whitmore Trust. The manager's eyebrows lifted slightly. "A trust most winners want access to all funds immediately." "I'm not most winners," I replied. "I've had 7 years to think about what matters." Grant nodded approvingly. "I can arrange the trust paperwork today. It'll be private, no public names, no media access." "Perfect." I signed the final forms with the steady hand Arthur had always admired. "I've had enough publicity already." As the manager processed the paperwork, Grant leaned closer. "Do you want me to submit Penelope's written statement about Bell and Mason's premature spending? It would strengthen our position if they try to challenge again." I considered this. "Yes, file it. Not for revenge, but for the record. I want it documented that kindness isn't stupidity." An hour later, we left with everything settled. The first transfer would arrive within 48 hours, the trust activated shortly after. I held the receipt with my name printed across the top. 12 simple letters that proved I wasn't invisible after all. That evening, I signed a lease on a small cottage near Seabrook Bay. Nothing extravagant, just a front porch facing the water, 2 bedrooms for when the grandchildren visited, and a garden patch perfect for roses. The realtor seemed confused that I didn't want to see the luxury properties in her portfolio. "I don't need marble countertops," I told her. "Just peace and a good view." I was selecting paint colors when my phone pinged an email from Bell. The subject line read, "Legal notice and health warning." Inside was a formal-looking document declaring me mentally incompetent to manage my assets, complete with a forged medical evaluation. Instead of anger, I felt a strange pity. She still hadn't learned that games like these only worked when your opponent was afraid. I forwarded it to Grant with a brief note. "Bell's latest. Thought you should see." His response came within minutes, a phone call, not a text. "Lorraine, this is an actionable offense. Forgery, defamation, attempted fraud. I'm filing a cease and desist immediately. Do what's necessary, but quietly," I said. "No need for spectacle." "You're remarkably calm about this," Grant noted. "People only lie when they're afraid of the truth," I replied. "And Belle is terrified." That night I slept deeply for the first time in years, lulled by the thought that tomorrow I wouldn't wake to Belle's rules or Mason's silence. The future stretched before me, finally my own to shape. The next week passed in a blur of paperwork, bank appointments, and quiet preparations. I purchased modest new furniture for the Seabrook house, arranged for utilities, and hired local contractors to install a rose trellis. "Red climbers, please," I told the landscaper. "The kind that smell like summer mornings." I was selecting kitchen curtains when Grant called. His voice had the crisp edge it took on when he was in full legal mode. "Belle has filed for emergency custody of the children, claiming you've manipulated Mason with the lottery winnings. She's also petitioning to have you declared mentally unfit." I set down the fabric samples. "Did she now?" "It's a 100-page complaint. All nonsense, of course, but will need to appear in family court. Judge Shaw has been assigned. She's fair, no nonsense. The first hearing is scheduled for next Monday." "I'll be ready." I wasn't surprised. Belle had always been predictable in her desperation. "Lorraine," Grant hesitated. "She's claiming you abandoned the family home willingly and gifted them the ticket as compensation for years of care." A laugh escaped me. Not bitter, just genuinely amused. Care, is that what she's calling it now? The courtroom was cooler than expected, the air conditioning humming quietly over the low murmur of voices. I sat beside Grant in a simple blue dress, hands folded, watching Belle make her entrance like an actress on opening night. White dress, perfect makeup, Mason trailing beside her like a shadow. Their attorney, a sharp-faced man with expensive cufflinks, arranged papers with dramatic precision. Judge Meredith Shaw entered, her salt and pepper bob framing keen eyes that missed nothing. "Court is now in session. Carter Whitmore versus Whitmore petition for emergency custody and financial guardianship." What followed was Belle's performance. Careful tears as she described my increasingly erratic behavior, my abandonment of the family, and my vindictive attempt to withhold the lottery winnings I had clearly gifted to them. "Your Honor," Belle's voice quavered perfectly, "I'm deeply concerned about my mother-in-law's mental state. She needs professional care, not financial responsibility that would overwhelm her." Judge Shaw listened impassively, then turned to Mason. "Mr. Whitmore, you've been notably silent in these proceedings. As Mrs. Whitmore's son, what is your assessment of her mental capacity?" Mason glanced at Belle, then down at his hands. The courtroom waited. When he finally spoke, his voice was low but clear. "My mother is perfectly competent, Your Honor. She always has been." Belle's head snapped toward him, eyes widening. "And the lottery ticket," Judge Shaw pressed. "It was hers. She's played the same numbers for 20 years. Mason swallowed hard. I made a terrible mistake." The judge nodded slightly. "Thank you for your candor." As witnesses took the stand, Penelope with her meticulous notes, neighbors who'd seen Belle throw my possessions from the window, the store owner who confirmed my regular lottery purchases, I sat quietly. The truth needed no embellishment from me. Belle's attorney called a geriatric specialist who had never met me but testified that women my age often suffered cognitive decline. Grant demolished him with 3 precise questions about standard diagnostic protocols. When it was my turn to speak, Judge Shaw asked simply, "Mrs. Whitmore, what do you want from these proceedings?" I stood looking not at Belle but at the photographs of my grandchildren on the evidence table. I want Ava and Micah to grow up in a stable home where they're valued for who they are, not what they have. I want them to understand that love has boundaries and consequences, and I want them to know their grandmother will always be there, not as a servant, but as family. The courtroom fell silent. "As for the money," I continued, "I've already established education trusts for both children accessible when they turn 18. What I do with the rest is my business, but I've never been wasteful and don't intend to start now." Judge Shaw studied me for a long moment. "Thank you, Mrs. Whitmore. This court will recess for deliberation." 2 hours later, we reassembled for the ruling. Belle sat rigid lips pressed white. Mason looked both terrified and relieved, a man preparing to face consequences long overdue. After reviewing all evidence, Judge Shaw began, this court finds the lottery ticket was legally purchased by Lorraine Whitmore, properly signed, and is her rightful property. The claims of mental incompetence are dismissed as without merit and potentially malicious. Belle's shoulders slumped. Regarding custody, the judge continued, the court grants primary physical custody to Mason Whitmore with Belle Carter Whitmore, granted supervised visitation pending completion of a 6-month therapeutic program addressing appropriate boundaries and family communication. She fixed Belle with a stern look. This court takes a very dim view of elder abuse, Mrs. Carter Whitmore. The documented pattern of verbal denigration, social isolation, and financial exploitation of Lorraine Whitmore constitutes serious misconduct. You will attend counseling or you will lose all access to your children. Is that clear? Belle nodded mutely. As for the financial guardianship petition, Judge Shaw continued, it is denied in full. Furthermore, the court formally reprimands counsel for filing frivolous claims and falsified medical documentation. She closed the file with finality. Mrs. Whitmore, this court recognizes you as the legal winner of the lottery prize and as a victim of familial abuse. The law stands with you today. The gavel fell with a sharp crack. Court adjourned. Outside, spring wind whipped off Seabrook Bay, cool and salt-laden. I let it tousle my silver hair without trying to smooth it down. For decades, I'd worried about appearances not making waves, not causing scenes. That version of me had walked into the courthouse, but someone stronger had walked out. Grant shook my hand formally. Congratulations, Lorraine. Complete vindication. I smiled. Thank you for everything, but I never needed external validation. I just needed the truth acknowledged. Penelope rushed over, wrapping me in a tight hug that smelled of her trademark gardenia perfume. I knew it would go your way. Justice finally showed up. Justice arrives in its own time, I replied, returning her embrace. I'm just glad I lived to see it. Mason approached hesitantly, standing a respectful distance away. When I nodded, he stepped closer. Mom, I'm sorry. For everything. I know. The kids miss you terribly. Would it be okay if, maybe this weekend? My door is always open to them, I said. And to you if you're coming as a son, not an envoy. He nodded, understanding the boundary. I've been looking at rentals near Seabrook, not too close, but near enough for the children to visit easily, I finished. That sounds sensible? We stood in awkward silence until he spoke again. What happens now? Now I plant roses and make a home, I answered simply. What happens with you depends on the choices you make going forward. A week later, I moved into the Seabrook cottage. The walls were freshly painted cream, the windows washed until they sparkled, the hardwood floors gleaming with lemon oil. I arranged my salvaged photos on the mantel, Arthur at 30, Mason's 5th birthday, the grandchildren as babies, each one a fragment of memory reclaimed. The contractors had finished the rose trellis along the garden wall. By summer, red blooms would climb toward the sun, their scent drifting through open windows. Arthur would have approved. Saturday morning, I heard tires on gravel. Through the kitchen window, I watched Mason's car pull up, Ava and Micah tumbling out before he'd fully stopped. They raced toward the porch, faces alight with excitement. Grandma, Grandma, Ava called, nearly tripping in her eagerness. Dad said we can stay all weekend if you want. I opened my arms as they barreled into me, their small bodies solid and warm. I'd like nothing better. Mason followed more slowly, carrying overnight bags and a grocery sack. I brought supplies for Dad's clam chowder, if that's okay. Perfect, I said, leading them inside. The kitchen needs christening with something special. We spent the afternoon cooking together, Mason following Arthur's recipe from memory, asking questions when he forgot steps. I guided, but didn't take over. He needed to learn this skill himself. The children set the table with solemn concentration, Micah carefully placing each spoon just so. As the chowder simmered, filling the cottage with the scent of cream and herbs, I slipped away to the garden shed. Behind paint cans and garden tools stood a turquoise bicycle with a white wicker basket, the twin of the one Belle had forced me to return on Ava's birthday. I wheeled it to the porch where Ava sat swinging her legs against the railing. When she saw it, her eyes widened to perfect circles. Is that for me? Really mine? I nodded. Happy belated birthday. But this gift comes with a condition. She looked up solemnly. What condition, Grandma? You must never let anyone make you believe you don't deserve beautiful things, I said, holding her gaze. Can you promise that? She nodded vigorously, then threw her arms around me. I promise, Grandma. Without another word, she hopped on the bike and was off, streamers fluttering as she circled the yard, her laughter carrying on the sea breeze. Inside, Mason watched through the window. You didn't have to do that? I wanted to, I said simply. Some promises need keeping even when they're years delayed. That evening, after the children were tucked into bed, Mason and I sat on the porch watching stars appear over the bay. The silence between us wasn't entirely comfortable yet, but it was honest a beginning. I've been attending that support group, he said finally. For single fathers, it's helping. I'm glad. They're teaching us about boundaries, how to say no without guilt, how to put the kids first without losing yourself. He turned to look at me. I keep thinking that's what Dad always tried to show me, but I never learned it. Your father understood that loving someone doesn't mean dissolving into them, I replied. He was firm but fair. You can be too. Mason nodded. I've started repaying those creditors. From when I thought the money was coming. It'll take time, but you'll manage, I said, neither offering to help nor criticizing. His debts were his to resolve. The weeks passed in a new rhythm. Mason and the children visited weekends. I established a scholarship fund at the local community college, began volunteering at the library's literacy program, and joined a watercolor class where my seascapes improved from shapeless blobs to recognizable horizons. Penelope and I started a small project, Hands for Home, a program helping older adults abandoned or exploited by family members find temporary housing and legal support. We began with a donated dining table, refinished it together, and placed it in the program's meeting room. This table, I told our first client, a trembling woman whose son had emptied her bank account, is where you'll sit without being insulted, eat without apologizing, and speak without being interrupted. Fall arrived with crimson leaves and cooler nights. I was preparing Sunday dinner when I heard an unfamiliar car in the driveway. Through the kitchen window, I saw Belle thinner, her expensive clothes replaced by simple jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back without its usual perfect styling. My first instinct was wariness, but as she stood uncertainly by her car, I saw something I hadn't expected: genuine vulnerability. Not the manufactured kind she'd displayed in court, but the real thing. I stepped onto the porch. Hello, Belle. She startled slightly. Lorraine, I'm sorry to come unannounced. What do you need? I asked directly. She hesitated, then spoke quietly. Help. I've lost my job. Creditors are calling. I don't know where to start. I studied her. The arrogance was gone, replaced by exhaustion and what appeared to be genuine regret. I gestured to the porch chair. Sit. Rain began falling as we talked, tapping against the roof in a steady rhythm. Belle explained her situation, the counseling sessions she'd attended, the apartment she could no longer afford, the job interviews that went nowhere once people connected her name to the court case. I made such a mess, she admitted. I thought money would solve everything, and when it was gone I had nothing left. Not even myself. I didn't offer sympathy, but I didn't offer judgment either. From a drawer, I took an envelope containing a list of resources: job centers, affordable housing contacts, support groups for people rebuilding after crises. There are no shortcuts to rebuilding a life, I told her. Just steady steps and genuine change. Can I see the children? She asked, voice small. When you complete your court-ordered counseling, you'll have supervised visitation. Neither Mason nor I will stand in the way of that. She nodded, eyes wet. Thank you. As she rose to leave, I added, one more thing, Belle. I won't give you money. Not $1. But if you need a hot meal or honest advice, this porch is open as long as you come with honesty. She paused. I'm sorry, Lorraine, for everything. I looked at her for a long moment. I hear that, and I accept it in my own way. I watched her walk back to her car through the rain, shoulders hunched against the downpour. The woman who had thrown me out of my own home was gone. This new person had a long road ahead, but at least she was walking in the right direction. That night after dinner was cleared away, Mason took the children home. The house settled into peaceful silence. I made tea and sat at my writing desk by the window where moonlight silvered the bay waters. I opened a drawer and took out Arthur's old fountain pen, the one he'd used to sign his first contract. With it, I wrote a letter addressed not to anyone else, but to myself. Dear Lorraine, I began. Forgiveness isn't erasing the past. It's refusing to let it control your future. Some people deserve second chances. Others deserve firm boundaries. Wisdom lies in knowing the difference. I continued writing until the moon was high, pouring out all I had learned about strength, about love, with conditions about the courage to stand alone. When finished, I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer, a message to myself for days when memory might soften the hard lessons learned. On the shelf above my desk, Arthur's photograph caught the moonlight. I touched the frame gently. I did what you always taught me, love. I signed my name and stood by it. From the children's room came a soft sound, Micah talking in his sleep. Tomorrow they would wake early, demanding pancakes and adventures. Mason would call about school schedules. Life would continue its imperfect, precious forward motion. I moved to the porch for one last moment of solitude. Seabrook Bay stretched before me, its waters reflecting countless stars. The wind carried salt and the promise of my roses, which had begun climbing the trellis in earnest. 7 years of silence had ended in 3 weeks of truth. The price had been high, but the peace that followed was worth every moment. I had lost a house, but found a home. Lost a son, but regained a man. Lost illusions, but found reality. We are our choices, Arthur used to say, and I had chosen self-respect, clear boundaries, and love that demanded accountability. The hardest choice had been letting Mason face consequences, but watching him grow into the father he needed to be proved it was the right one. I closed my notebook and stood savoring the night air one last time before heading inside. The porch light cast a warm glow across the garden, illuminating the turquoise bicycle leaning against the fence, streamers dancing in the breeze. Some promises once broken can be remade. Some trust once shattered can be rebuilt. And some women once silenced can find voices stronger than they ever imagined. I went inside and closed the door gently behind me, ready at last for whatever tomorrow might bring.